Ah, I think I've started it.
Ah, there's a little red light
You
on.
see the light? That's it. Thank you, Malcolm.
What did you do, kick it?
I don't know what I did.
Well, that's too bad. You'll never know how to do it again.
That's right. Right. I'll have this problem probably every time. Okay, I'm going to... the date is May 3rd, 1999. I'm Carol Haddock, and I'm interviewing Edgar E. Renfrew. Edgar lives in...
Lock Haven, Pennsylvania.
And he's here visiting in Moscow, Idaho, at the home of his brother Malcolm, and is here for an interview. Thank you. Okay. First of all, I've made up some questions. Some of them are general questions we use for people we interview, and then some of them are specific just for you. So, and I got some of this information from Malcolm's form also. Why did your parents move to Potlatch?
Our father got a job with the lumber company. He had been working for the Wheeler Motor Company in Colfax, and I don't know what happened there, but it became important for him to get another job. I suspect that they closed off the department or something of this sort. I was only in the second grade at the time, so I wasn't much involved with family economics.
I understand that Schnurs were your cousins?
The Schnurs, yes.
And who arrived in Potlatch first?
We did.
The Renfrews did?
Yes, I'm sure that my father was instrumental in getting Fred Schnur the job in the mercantile, because that's where my father worked.
Okay. What are your earliest memories of Potlatch?
Well, the first memory was our trip to the town. The way it smelled of fresh sawdust. We stayed at the hotel for a short while before we moved up to 710 Elm Street. And I can remember Rusty Helm and a group of other small boys playing marbles there. It was early in the spring. It was probably February or March when we got here. And then, of course, I went right into the second grade, and I have quite clear memories of that.
What is the first event you attended in Potlatch that made a big impression on you?
The first event? Well, school, I suppose. Is that an event?
I think so.
Okay. I remember isolated things about the school system. We actually lived next door to the principal, whose name was Chambers, the superintendent of the school system, whose name was Chambers. And I can remember the Christmas programs they had, and how I suppose the first Christmas program I ever saw down at the Potlatch Amateur Athletic Club would have been the following Christmas, and I felt so superior because the first graders were cheering when Santa Claus came on. But I had an older brother. He had straightened me out on such things. I knew that it was somebody from the lumber company.
Did you like school?
Oh yes, very much. I always felt kind of guilty in the fall. I knew I was not supposed to like school, but I always was kind of glad when the summer was over. The river would get full of algae, and our parents wouldn't let us swim late in the year. So there really wasn't a lot to do then if the swimming hole was unfit. Yes, I enjoyed school.
Can you tell me where the elementary school was?
Oh, indeed. It was, I think you call it the Hiawatha Apartments now.
Okay.
It's a large building there, yes.
Okay. How was discipline handled? Did they spank, or do you remember any incidents of discipline?
No, we were all, I was always afraid they would send me to the superintendent's office, because, of course, not only was he a next door neighbor and a friend, but he was a figure of authority, and I don't remember having discipline problems in school. We behaved ourselves. We marched. The boys marched in one side, and the girls marched in the other side. And Mr. Taylor would played some terrible phonograph records and would stand beside the phonograph, and we were supposed to march in time to the music. But those records must have been made about 1917. They were pretty bad and worn out.
All of the grades were in that building then?
Yes.
In Hiawatha at that time?
No, not quite. They later had to put in 2 first grades, and that meant that that this only went to the 6th grade. The 7th and 8th grades were in a special building that was over the other side of where the old high school used to be. What street is that? I'd have to count up the streets to realize what street that was on. Spruce. That would be the bottom of Spruce Street, I guess. It was down on toward the park end of that.
Oh.
I think the building is gone now, is it not?
I think so.
But that had the 7th and 8th grades. I attended there.
Okay. What were the bathroom facilities in the building? Did you go out?
Oh no, this was all modern stuff. Good heavens, we were very, very civilized in those days. In the big school, the one that is now the Hiawatha, the boys' room wasn't all that sanitary, but we used it. The girls had a play area in there on wet days, so the girls could had a place to stay. And once in a while, we would have social activities, round games and things of that, and we would go into the girls' basement, and that was, we weren't sure that was the proper thing to do, but we went anyway. And it was a separate room from the facilities, of course.
Okay, so there was, the basement was used for rainy days and also had bathroom facilities.
That's correct. Also, the manual training facilities for the high school courses, and I don't remember the 7th and 8th grades had them, but that was also there. That would have been in the southwest corner of the basement, with a manual training room.
Okay, that was going to be one of my later questions, but what was included in the manual training?
Well, fundamental how to, I think one of the first things we did was take a square board, and then we would plane off the side, and then we would set a T-square and make it into a square. So simple use, the use of simple tools, I would say.
Okay.
I was never very good at it.
Did all school-age children attend school? Were they required to?
They would attend school until, well, sometimes they would start to drop out in the 6th grade or so. If they were held back a year, and then the next year perhaps they would drop out. Yes, we did not have the same personnel all the way through the grades. And there were many of them that stopped at the 8th grade, of course, finished the 8th grade. Sometimes I think the girls were not encouraged to go because it wasn't important to educate girls, and sometimes the boys had to start to work in the mill if they were lucky enough to get jobs, because of course, well, I got out of grade school in 1928. Things were pretty good then, but they got pretty bad a little later.
Sure. There was a wide variety of ethnic groups in Potlatch. Do you know of any problems that was caused by this diversity?
I don't think so. We assumed that the Japanese wanted to live in that part of town, and I guess later that there was a section that where the Italian kids lived, but they were well accepted in on the basketball teams and things like that. Tony DeSantis and Nello Montani. I don't remember that there was any anti-feeling I got about that. The town was heavy in Scandinavians. There were a lot of Scandinavians in town. But I don't remember anybody ever ever saying anything against another group. We did not have any blacks. I don't remember any Indians in school. No, I think it was very free from that sort of prejudice.
How did you spend the day as a child?
How did I spend the days as a child? I liked to read, but I had a lot of friends too. There was a gang that I went all through grade school and high school, and indeed the University of Idaho with. But we were in one another's houses a great deal. My particular friend was Joe Greer, who lived across the street. He's now down in Mississippi. Also, after Mr. Chambers left, it must have been when I was in about the 3rd grade, the next superintendent was H.L. Peterson, who moved into the same house next door, and he had 5 children. He was a widower, had 5 children, and a couple of them, of course, were pretty close to my age. I spent a lot of time there. They had books, and I enjoyed being there. But Joe Greer across the street, Bud Smyset down at the corner of 6th and Elm, Robert Morris, who was over on Spruce, Chuck Linebaugh, who lived with his uncle, the Gambles, up on what we call Knob Hill. Is it still Knob Hill? Mm-hmm. And who did I leave out? Oh, Frank Ibsen, whose father was the physician. He lived on Knob Hill, too. And you could usually find one of us in somebody else's house. We had a lot of fun.
The library, where was the library at that time?
When we first got to Potlatch, the library was in a small room in the Union Church, and Mrs. Metcalf was the librarian. But later they put it down on Pine Street, down not far from where the hotel was. How can I describe it? It would have been on the east side of the street, not far from the city center.
I think we have a picture here.
I'm sure you do.
I'll show you.
I think the present library is somewhere along in there too, isn't it?
Yes. They actually took out the old building and
Yes.
put the present library there.
It was not much bigger than this. It was about the size of this room, I would guess.
And someone lived in there, I understand?
I don't know.
No.
Mrs. Metcalf was still the librarian and most of my time there. And I don't know where she lived. I don't remember that it was there.
What were your chores as a child? Did you have any?
Yes, we split kindling. Of course, our mother cooked on a wood stove. And the big meal was in the middle of the day, and it took me 50 years to figure out why, but it would be awfully hot on a summer afternoon, I suspect. So yes, and I would, when he was there, he would chop the wood, and I would chop the kindling and things of that sort. We mowed the lawn, and I don't remember ever having an allowance. But on the other hand, through our father's connections, both my brother and I got jobs peddling bills for the mercantile company on Friday afternoons, and we got 50 cents a week for this, and this was, we lived pretty good on that. You could buy a candy bar about 8 inches long for a nickel and go to all the movies. Yes, but we had tasks. Not many, not enough maybe.
And then there was a theater in town.
Oh yes, People's Theater. It was on Pine Street, across from the confectionery. There was one of everything in town. There was one shoemaker, there was one store, there was one candy store, pool hall. The candy store was the pool hall. One theater. There was one of everything.
What childhood games did you play?
Well, in the neighborhood, as a small child, in the neighborhood where we lived, there were quite a few children. There were the Peterson kids at the top of, different Peterson, at the top of Elm Street, and the Scotts lived next to them, Helen and Johnny Scott, and then they skipped a house. Well, the Osmonds lived there, then Joe Greer, and then the Petersons next door and all that. And we had a pretty good neighborhood crowd. We would, the house, the 735 Elm Street where we lived, was the last one on the street. Above that was a field which occasionally was plowed for crops. But if they weren't growing anything there, we would rake up the weeds and play softball with, well, we used an indoor baseball because we would throw it at each, the way you'd put someone out was to hit them with the ball. And then in the evenings, we would have games around the telephone pole at the corner of, let's see, what would it have been, 6th, 7th, 8th Street? That doesn't sound right. We never called them by names. We just would say the telephone pole by the Peterson's house. And we would play hide and seek and run sheep run and things like that.
Did you have favorite toys or play areas?
Toys? Well, I inherited a bicycle from my brother, and I inherited a catcher's mitt from him, and a bow and arrow and all that. I pretty much knew what the toys were going to be. But our parents were good to us on that. We had the things we needed.
The high school manual training course, did the girls take the course?
No. I don't remember any of them.
Just wasn't something they felt that the girls needed?
No, I think this was considered man's work in those days or something. Home economics, I don't remember any boys taking home economics.
You had a large number of classmates graduate from college and many with advanced degrees. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I hadn't thought about it until my cousin Bob Snurr one time said that he felt that H.L. Peterson ran a pretty good school system. And this is probably right. Of course, it goes back a little farther than that. The lumber company paid all of the taxes in town, and Mr. Laird was very proud of the town and proud of the school system, I think. And I think they were superior teachers, that they were pretty carefully screened when they came in. When we went to the University of Idaho, when they heard we were from Potlatch, they would say, well, you won't have to take bonehead English, because they knew what the Potlatch kids did. I think it was a quality system. And without sounding immodest, we had some talent in the group too.
That was going to be my next question. Did you feel that your class was exceptional?
I really think it was. Frank Gibson's father was a physician, and Robert Morris's brother was a successful patent lawyer, and my brother certainly had capabilities. I think that all of us had some, well, to use the word capabilities again, I think also that we, without really making an issue of it, I think we competed with each other. We didn't want to be the dummy in the crowd, so we really studied.
What was your summer employment during college?
During college? Well, I started summer jobs in high school.
You're welcome to start there. Summer jobs in high school.
Summer jobs in high school, okay. I went to Boy Scout camp the summer I was 12 and the summer I was 13, but the summer I was 14 I got a job. The golf course used to be where the Mormon stake is now. It filled that square, and I mowed the greens and allegedly watered the lawn. I wasn't very good at it. I got $2 a day, but I was gainfully employed. Mrs. Gibson, Frank's mother, the physician's wife, would call me over in the afternoons and make lemonade. I would have that. Frank wasn't there that summer. I don't remember where he was. And then I worked in the sawmill, worked in the store and in the sawmill, both the same summer. I think I quit the store job because I was making more money working on the, I think that was the year I worked on the molding machine. My brother was there too. And then one great summer, I was a flagman when they put the blacktop on the road, the first blacktop that ever came into Potlatch. And there were about 100 cars a day, but we would start at dawn and work until dark, and we were paid some 35 cents an hour, but you could pile up a lot of hours on days like that. And so I went back. I was late in high school then. I remember that because Dr. Wygant, the dentist, told our father, he says, I saw your boys as a flagman on that road repair out there. He said Edgar was standing in the sun and Malcolm was sitting in the shade. He said, I guess that shows you the advantage of a college education. Our father was amused by that. But I think those were the... Oh, in college then, I was in blister rust one summer. You remember when they were trying to pull the rabies, the host for the, what is a disease that affects white pine. And that was a good summer. We had fine food. We came back in fine physical shape. 2 years we were unable to get jobs, and so we cut the family wood. We went out on Robert Morris's father's parents' homestead out on Rock Creek and cut wood. So those, I think, were all the jobs I had as a high school and university student in the summer.
Do you remember what kind of wages you were paid?
Oh, indeed I do. $2 a day on the golf course, and in the sawmill we would get $3, I think $3.20 a day. And I suspect that, as I say, on the road job, it didn't pay very much, but the hours were so long and the work was so easy. You'd take books, and I would take books and sit there and read, and every 30 minutes a car would come in, and you'd flag them down and say, be careful, and then you'd sit down and read some more. It was very easy work. But those were that was the kind of money we made. In blister rust, we made, I believe it was $4 a day, but they charged us 99 cents a day for food. But oh, the food, it was lumberjack style food. We had a good summer that year. And the $3 was absolutely clear because we were living in tents.
While you were working for the lumber company, in the sawmill, I'm thinking of, did you ever feel or were you aware of any unrest because of company policy?
No, I don't think so. It was the relationship with the lumber company, as I remember it, was we kind of considered it a benevolent autocracy or some fancy name like that. They ran a good school system. They kept the town clean, and I don't remember anything like that. But of course, you must understand, I was pretty young at the time. I was essentially gone from Potlatch by 1932 when I finished high school. But none of my friends ever seemed to have gotten in trouble. As I tell people back in Pennsylvania, if you didn't behave yourself in Potlatch, you didn't have a job, you didn't have any credit, you didn't have a place to live, so you didn't stay in Potlatch. I think that people probably left town with clouds over them, but I was unaware of it.
How did your father feel about his employment with Potlatch?
He liked the job very much, but he was a nervous man, and he worried a lot. Bob did. He became ill about 1928, somewhere along there, and our mother was then applied for and was appointed postmaster, and so that saw us through some times. I think the times were much tougher than I realized. There was always food on the table, and I just assumed there always would be. They were tough times, though, in the 29, 30, into 30s.
Into the Depression years. What were his duties then for Potlatch?
Our father?
Yes.
He was the auditor in the mercantile company.
Uh-huh.
He kept the books. For a while, he was the credit manager and all that sort of stuff.
Did he have an office?
Oh yes, he had an office with several employees there in on the top floor in one of the corners. It was a place for about four or five people.
Did your father retire then from Potlatch, or did he take up selling insurance?
He took up selling insurance after his health broke. It took him about a year to get back on his feet, and he actually did manual labor for a while to get his health back, and then he started selling insurance. And he pretty much sold every kid in Potlatch a $1,000 policy, I think. And then I believe that the lumber company needed the house and asked them if they could find a place to stay that was not in one of the company houses. And at that point, my father knew that he just about done everything he could in Potlatch anyway. So they, when the move was indicated, they moved to Coeur d'Alene, and he took up insurance, selling insurance.
Can you tell me anything about the logging camps, working conditions there? Or?
No, I was never in a logging camp, except the closest I came to it was that one summer in blister rust. There were supposed to be 4 of these blister rust camps up there with about 30 men in each, but it was a very bad year for fire. So they moved 3 of the camps out to fight fire, but we were the one that were left in the valley to, in case fire came there. The result was that the mule train that was to supply all 4 of the camps had only one to supply, so the guy just kept coming back and forth with food for us. Oh, the food was wonderful that year. 3 or 4 kinds of fresh meat and all the vegetables you could eat. The iceberg, the lettuce was really iceberg. You'd sink it in the creek, which was just a little above freezing. Oh boy,
Now, where did you say the camp was?
It was up in the Hoodoos, up in the headwaters of the North Fork.
And so they brought it directly from Potlatch out to the camp?
Well, except that they would bring it up to the end of the road in a truck, and then this guy had these 7 or 8 mules, and then he wouldn't have anything to do with the mules except bring them to the one camp, which was only a few miles up the stream. Robert Morris and Oscar Smyset were in the same camp that I was, and some men that I later met that I knew at the University of Idaho. That was the year we were sophomores, I think.
What leisure time activities were available to you in Potlatch?
Well, the amateur athletic club, we got up on, this goes back into our grade school days again. Saturday mornings we would play basketball at the PAAC. We had a Boy Scout troop. Mr. Craney was the scoutmaster. Bob Craney was in my class at school. Not one of the group that I ran with the most, but we were always cordial friends. We swam in the summer. My parents would only let me swim once a day, so I usually swam in the mornings. And we bicycled quite a bit. I've always regretted that Potlatch never had any concrete sidewalks because I never learned to roller skate. I grew up with that blight on my childhood.
Well, where was the pool at that time? Was it in the athletic club, or was it outward?
The pool?
The pool?
We swam in the river.
Oh, you swam in the river?
Yeah. There were 3 or 4 places. The main one was at the bridge where it was a sort of dam in those days.
Oh, yes.
That was the main one. We sometimes swam in the boom, which was down in the log pond, and sometimes up at the bend, which was a few hundred yards above the bridge, and sometimes clear up at the bullpen. So there were about 4 places where we swam. But the main one was we would dive off the piers in the bridge, and that's not the one that's there now. This one ran directly across. The one that's there now is a longer one, which takes some of the curves out. There still is a pier down there, I think, from the old bridge, isn't there? We must look.
There's some cement there. I don't know if that's where they had dammed the river or what there was there, but
the construction of the bridge, when I was there, was mostly logs with stones holding it down. There apparently had been an earlier bridge there because one of the places that we swam to was a similar series of crossed logs filled with stone, and we would swim out to that and sit out there. There was a dam that went out in a flood about 1908 or 10. My grandfather Mackenzie told me one time, and I suspect that the thing we swam to was one of the remnants of that dam, which did go out.
Now, did your grandfather also live in Potlatch?
Our grandfather, no, not at that time, and not that grandfather. But our Mackenzie grandfather had been in Colfax. Our parents went to high school in Colfax, and he was in the lumber business there. And he remembered this because the Codd brothers had a lumber mill, and they lost a lot of logs in this flood. The logs were put up, and then when the water receded, the logs stayed there, and they couldn't get them out. And I remember one time he was walking down to the bend where we were swimming, and he saw all these logs lying out there, and he said, "I wonder if those are the Codd logs." And he went and looked at the end of them, and sure enough, here was the brand, the C, stamped on the end of them. So I got a star in my crown with my friends by showing them the C on the end of the log and why the C was there. But it was because he was a retail lumber merchant that he remembered the great flood that took out the dam at Potlatch and lost a lot of them.
What activities were there for women? And how did your mother spend her days at home?
Well, our mother was quite active in the Women's Union at the church and the Polida Club. Do you know about the Polida Club?
No.
Po from Potlatch, La from Latah, Ida from Idaho, so the Polida Club. And it was a group that put on plays and had skits and put on dances and things of that sort. Quite an active group. It was, and it was not limited to the Protestants in the Union Church. Our mother actually was interested in a number of good works. I remember that every year she ran the anti-tuberculosis, the Cross of Lorraine stamps, and she would sell those to organize the town for that. And I think she was in a number of other good works like that, some of which I wasn't very aware of. I think that they were helping people that needed help and that sort of stuff. And of course, as postmaster, why, she was very visible in town. Why, everybody in town knew who Mrs. Renfrew was. I don't think she was ever bored. She read a lot too, as did my father.
Did she teach Sunday school?
What?
Teach Sunday school?
Oh yes, oh sure. And my father, being an accountant, every town he ever went to, he was the treasurer of the church, yes. Yes, our mother taught Sunday school.
She worked then as postmaster from 1928 to 32.
Well, actually, it was she was appointed in the Hoover administration and went on into the Roosevelt. So I think it was more like 1930 to 34.
Oh, okay.
But perhaps Malcolm will remember more carefully than I. She was certainly postmaster. I was still in high school when she was postmaster because I was the janitor. I swept the post office every night, washed the windows on Saturday. That's another job, come to think of it. I got $8 a month for that one. She said, "I think that the job is worth about $8 a month, so I will put in for 16 because they always give you half what you ask for." And it worked out that way. And I said, "Why couldn't you have asked for $32? And she said, "You weren't worth it." But the post office was not where it is now. It was up at the next street across from. I think that Cada's furniture store is up. It would be across the street from where the old post office was.
Oh, okay.
In those days, it housed Dr. Wygant's dental offices, and around the corner, I think there were apartments upstairs too.
That was on 6th Street.
6th Street. It faced 6th Street, yes. And at the Fine Larch, it would have been at the corner of Larch and I always have to name all the streets in order to remember which one was which.
Then her job ended because your father and her moved out of
No.
town, or?
Her job ended because Franklin Roosevelt appointed the next postmaster, and she was a Republican. She got it because she was a Republican, and she lost it because she was a Republican.
What do you remember about Allison Laird? Can you describe him?
Yes, indeed. I remember him as a kind of a figure that filled me with awe. He was quite hard of hearing and a little hard for a youngster to communicate with. And indeed, he didn't have much to say to me anyway. I think he probably knew that I was the Renfrew kid, and probably knew that I was a lousy greenskeeper on the golf course. But he was a fine man. I think he was well respected in the town. But as I say, I went through high school when he was running the town, and he ran it with an iron hand. But we didn't socialize, you might say.
Do you remember any other company supervisors?
Oh, sure, Mr. Humiston and Mr. Irwin, and later on Mr. O'Connell. I didn't know him as well. But the Humistons were family friends because Julian was a friend of Malcolm's, so I saw quite a bit of him and knew Mrs. Humiston. Our mother was very fond of Mrs. Humiston. And let's see, who else would it be? Well, I knew who they all were, Mr. Peelan and good heavens, if I'd stopped to think. I knew who the ones were who were running the different departments of this all. Lawshall, Otto Lawshall, was a prime salesman. And those are the ones I think that I remember. Decker, there was a man named Decker that was Mr. Laird's son-in-law, I think. Arlie Decker.
What areas of the community were taboo to women or to children or to the working class?
I don't remember any that were taboo to the working class. Women didn't hang around the pool hall, at least the pool playing part. The confectionery, of course, was open to them. But I don't think there were any women pool shooters in town. I don't remember that there was no, as I say, the town was run in a fashion so there were no sinful spots, so to speak. You could buy, after Prohibition was repealed, you could buy beer at the hotel or at the pool hall. Those were the only two places where beer was sold. I don't remember that there were any district that might have been considered a red light district in another town or anything like that.
Oh, okay. I was wondering about the golf course.
Women played golf.
Oh?
Oh, yeah, indeed they did.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
So everyone in town was welcome to play in the course?
I don't know that they were welcome. I don't remember that there was probably a modest charge. It was a club. But my mother was not interested in playing golf, and I don't remember our father playing there very much, although he had 4 golf clubs. I don't remember Pop playing up there at that time. But yes, women played. The company wives played up there. But as I don't remember any of the laborers playing on the course. I don't know whether they were kept off or whether they just didn't want to play.
What other events were heralded by the mill whistle other than the normal shift changes?
There was a whistle, I think about 5:30, which was supposed to wake them up, and then the whistle at 7 that started. At noon, they blew a whistle that they tested the fire whistle, which I think was an augmented chord. I used to hear that when I was in Seattle. I would hear steamboat whistles with that kind of a tone, and I would wake up and think fire. And then at the shift changes, I think that those are the ones. I don't remember anything in the evening, but it was part of the noise. I suspect that if the whistle hadn't blown at noon, well, we would have looked up and said, "What was that?"
Did you enjoy living in Potlatch?
Oh, indeed I did. I think it was a great place to grow up. I remember it with great pleasure. I tell my friends in Pennsylvania that I had a happy childhood.
Did you know a Mabel Kelly?
Oh yes, Mabel Kelly was over in the main office. She had contact with people. One of the things I remember was that poor Mabel was in Spokane one time and apparently had some kind of a traffic accident. And the newspaper story came out, Mabel Kelly, 44. And from then on, my mother always referred to her as Mabel Kelly, 44. Mabel's age, which she hadn't told up until that point. She was not a particularly close family friend, but I would say, "How do you do, Miss Kelly?" when we met on the street.
Many of the pictures we have has her name on the back to be returned to.
She was a distinguished citizen. There's no question about it. Yes, Mabel Kelly.
In fact, there were some pictures with many of the supervisors sitting together at a table, and she might have been the only woman.
That sounds reasonable. She had a job of responsibility. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think she had to do with payroll and things of that sort, and she was well known in town.
I believe some of the families on Nob Hill had women who lived in to help with the chores and things. Did you know any of the women that did this type of work?
No, there were some of the girls, and as I said a minute ago, there were some girls that were not encouraged to go to high school by their families because they felt that their 8th grade education was enough. I remember one of them that did domestic work up on the hill. Her name was Larson, if that fits. And I suspect there were others. The Alec Walshes had a Japanese houseboy. He came over in 1926, and he was in the 6th grade with me. And he said he was 21, and I suspect he was 28 or so, and I also suspect that he was about a Lieutenant JG in the Japanese Navy. He went around taking pictures of the Washington Water Power Dam in Spokane and things of that sort. And I think it was the Japanese were also recognized that one day they would be arguing with us, and they were gathering what information they could. But he was here, I'm sure, to improve his English understanding of the language. His name was Frank Uyeno. I loved him dearly. He was very good to me. I even wrote letters to him after he went back to Japan.
We've received some information from Carl Fulton. Did your father know of Mr. Fulton?
I don't recognize that name. Carl Fulton.
Carl was the son's name. I don't remember for sure. I think I've got his pictures here. George Fulton was his father's name.
I don't remember that either. What year would that be? Do you have a date on it?
You know, he just has when he was born. He was born in Potlatch in 1919, and he also had a sister that was older than he was, Kate Fulton.
No, I don't remember that at all. That man would have been in grade school when I was in high school, and I had no particular interest in grade school kids.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't remember that name at all.
Well, I don't really have any more questions. Are there any stories you'd like to tell us, or?
Oh, I remember events when we woke up in the night and the ice house was burning. In those days, in the early 20s, they harvested ice from the river and took it into the ice house and covered it with sawdust, of which Potlatch had a great deal. And must have been about 1925 or so when it burned. You can get this more accurately from the guy whose memory is better. I think that I was aware that Potlatch was liable to have a fire any time. All the houses were wood, they were close together. The fire department consisted of men, I presume they were trained, but they dragged hand carts. There wasn't even a fire engine. I always was afraid that a fire would start in Pine Street and go all the way up the hill to where we lived. Incidentally, we lived so close to the reservoir that we didn't have much water pressure up in our end of town. I mean, having a garden in the summertime was kind of a challenge because there was just a trickle of water out of the hose. We were in the house that was actually, I think, closest to the reservoir, which is still in use, I understand.
Yes, yes. That's quite a large reservoir, too. I read something the other day, I believe it's 1 million gallons, and I was shocked that they have such a large reservoir.
Well, that's a pretty good-sized reservoir. In my later years, I was on the board of a water company, the Suburban Water Company of Lock Haven. 1 million gallons was about what we used in our dye plant, which used quite a lot of water. So 1 million gallons is a substantial amount.
Do you remember moving from Colfax to Potlatch?
Oh, indeed, yes.
Was there a big difference in the amenities from Colfax to Potlatch?
Well, as a second grader, I had been my life kind of consisted of home and parents and brother and dog and school, and it was simply a new set of friends. One of them didn't turn out to be much of a friend. His name was Rusty Helm, and Rusty had to beat up on everybody who came to town, and that included me several times. I used to hate Rusty Helm with a clear white light. I don't remember him with pleasure like I do with the rest of the people in town.
I can understand that.
But it was a good place to be, I think, and I felt we were well prepared when we went out to university, and I had a satisfying career after that, but I certainly remember Potlatch with a lot of pleasure.
Could you tell me a little bit about your career, since you didn't get that down on
Well, briefly, yes. After I got out of the University of Idaho with a degree in physics in 1936, and jobs are very hard to come by, and I took a job first trying to sell real silk, which was a mistake because nobody had any money, and I wasn't a very good salesman. Then I went to Seattle and worked briefly in a service station, and that pooped out when the summer did. Came back to Spokane, was trying to get a job, and one of my fraternity brothers told me that there was an assayer's position open in Kellogg, Idaho, at the smelter. And I'd had all the chemistry courses at the university, and the fact that I was a physics major didn't matter. They apparently figured that they could teach me their own system anyway, and they did. And that was 2 years. It wasn't an awfully pleasant 2 years because it was in the assay office, and part of the time I was in front of muffles, which late in August, the muffles were dull red heat. But I managed to have enough money to go back to graduate school after the job gave up late in 1938, and in 1939 I entered the University of Minnesota thinking I would get a master's degree in analytical chemistry, but I was lucky enough to get an assistantship, and I liked organic chemistry, so I took a PhD in organic chemistry. And I then worked for General Allen and Film. I worked for only 3 companies in my life, but they had 7 names. They kept changing the names all the time. So I worked with them until, that was in Easton, Pennsylvania. I lived in Phillipsburg, New Jersey, and Easton until 1958. Went to Copper's company in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, a dye operation. Was transferred by the company to the main research laboratory, so I worked in a suburb of Pittsburgh. Didn't work out very well, so I quit and went out to 3M Company in St. Paul. And I had married a girl from Wisconsin, and she was pleased to go back to where her family was. And we were there for 4 years, and the dye company in Lock Haven, they had reconstituted, reorganized, and renamed it, asked me if I would come back as a director of research, and this was flattering. And we liked Lock Haven, and Geneva had realized that she how cold it was in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So we went back, and it was a very good move. And so I finished my career in Lock Haven with the dye company I'd worked in from 58 to 60. And I got back to Lock Haven in 1966 and retired in 1980. I retired as vice president of research and development of was by then called American Color and Chemical. And we were a factor in the dye business. We were not quite as big as DuPont or Allied, their dye divisions, but we competed with a measure of success. I stayed in Lock Haven in my retirement because by this time one of my daughters was in the Twin Cities and the other one was in New Jersey, and there was no place I could be close to both of them. And I've enjoyed Lock Haven. It's a nice town too. It's much like Moscow. It's about the same size. It has a university. It does not have many, it doesn't have a lot of economic power. It used to be Piper aircraft, and many people remember Lock Haven as where Piper Cubs were made, but that's gone. The dye company that I worked for is gone. There is a big paper mill there, but the university and the paper mill are about the only things directly in town where jobs are handy. But it's a beautiful country. It's rolling hills covered with trees, fish streams between every pair of hills. So I like it.
You must fish a lot.
I do enjoy fishing. I enjoy walking along small streams and catching small fish. A lot of deer. I've had deer in my backyard and bear in the front yard, things of that sort of stuff. So it's a very pleasant country.
That sounds like a wonderful place. Well, I thank you very much. I'm going to call a halt to this for right now.
Well, I can, as I told you, as I warned you, I have a tendency to talk too much.